way to sum this up is that the goal is going to be that in the future, I won't have to deal with a lot of shoe boxes. That's kind of the old joke for anybody who is an accountant and does tax preparation is the person who comes in with a whole big box of receipts. And that's kind of what we want to try to avoid because it makes it more expensive. The first few things that I want to talk about are just maybe some definitions. The size of nonprofit, which you're all nonprofits, and the size that we're talking about is any sort of nonprofit of under 50,000 in annual revenues, something like that. So, the important thing when it comes to record keeping, the important thing is maybe not even so much getting clean records to me or what you have to give to the put together for the IRS or for the state of Oregon. It's being able to report to your board and say, here's where we are on kind of a monthly basis. And you know, we've got some money, we spent some money on this and that, and we had some money come in. So, and that's probably the most important thing. I've got in here several sample, let me go ahead and share my screen, I guess. So on about the starting at about page 4, I've got several sample. This is what, you know, you're going to put together on a regular monthly basis to kind of keep good track of your records and your books and your finances. What we would start with is just simply a check register. Now, on a regular basis throughout the month, you're going to have maybe some money come in. Maybe you're going to have some checks that you write. Maybe you're going to have some payments you make by debit card or credit card. Those you're going to record in your check register, preferably as they occur, so that you know you're keeping track of them. You're not going to forget about them before the month ends, because when you get to the end of the month, you're going to get a bank statement, and you're going to need to reconcile to that bank statement. Now, the example I've shown here, this is page 5 of the materials. According to the bank statement, there's about a little over $6,500 in the bank account, but our check register is showing a balance of $6,180. So we've got to do this monthly reconciliation. We find that, you know, you'll go through the bank statement, check off, okay, this is cleared, but then we've got a couple things that haven't cleared. Those outstanding checks help us to tie out the bank statement to the check register. There's about a $340 difference. It's because of a couple of outstanding checks. If we were to try to say that that we have $6,500, $6,520 still, assuming that the bank statement was correct, well, we might forget about these 2 checks that we've written, hopefully have them recorded in the check register. but that can make a bit of a difference if you're dealing with just a certain amount of funds every month. Um, one of the things so I'll go back here to the check register. Once again, we're gonna need to make sure that you're recording things as you're going along through the month. Any checks written, any deposits made, any kind of payments made or received, and kind of keep a running balance, running track of where your bank balance is at. One other thing that I note, and this is on page 3, which kind of expands what I am talking about on the record keeping side of things, is that you should always, in addition to keeping track of payments made and and all of that, you also need to keep track of any checks that are voided. The reason for that is you want to make sure they're all accounted for. If you make a mistake on one, you have to void it. You should probably make note of that. Maybe even here in this check register. Um, and because you don't want that voided check to disappear, and then somebody's going to wonder, hey, what happened to check number 1741? It hasn't cleared. Um, it's gonna it's gonna protect you from it's gonna protect whoever's writing out the checks from the possibility of somebody's saying, hey, are you taking off with our funds or anything like that. Um, so let me talk a little bit about the things that I've put together here are just Excel spreadsheets. That is what some people will find to be the easiest to keep track of their finances. Some people like to go a step beyond that and use some kind of accounting software, like, say, for instance, QuickBooks. Um, if you're only dealing with, a few $1,000 in and out per year, it's probably not really necessary. I'm not sure really what the cost of QuickBooks is, but I know there's some expense to it. And if you can go something a little more simple, like just an Excel spreadsheet, then I'd probably recommend doing that. Um, anyway, so we get to the end of the month. We've reconciled the bank account. Now what we're going to want to do is to put together some kind of a report so that we can report to the board. And that's on the next page, my page 6. And this could be used for reporting to the board, and this could also be used for turning into, sending into me to say, here, we need to get our taxes taken care of for the year. So what I've done on this sheet is we've got several columns. The current month, we're using in this case the December 31st year end. I think a lot of the neighborhood organizations are using June 30th, but it's easier sometimes to think on a calendar year basis. So we've got current month, and this is all the expenses, income and expenses here. Now, these things that I have listed here are the same things that I have over here in this check register. So each of those has been put into into one of these rows, whether it's income coming in via donations or some program fees, or if it's money spent on salaries or or other expenses. And I've got those all categorized here so that we have some idea, first on a monthly basis and then on a yearly basis, how much money we've spent and how does that compare to the annual budget? And then down at the bottom, it's kind of a cross check as far as here's our cash at the end of the month, same as what we have over here on the bank reconciliation, same as what we have here at the end of at the bottom row of the check register. And you also have the same amount here at the end of showing us the end of the year, end of month and end of year. The budget. Now, this will be something that you would maybe want to set up as a board and using it as a comparison to how did we do this year or how are we doing so far this year? Like for instance, we thought we were going to get $10,000 in individual donations. Well, we only got 6,000. That'll be something, if you'll want to work out with your board is that, realistic? Because you're going to be, planning your next year, kind of working around that budget. You'll want to say, do we think we're going to, are we going to get that $15,000 from the Jones Foundation again, or are we going to be spending the same amount on salaries as we did last year? Probably would go up. Some of those things would go up, but some of them are going to stay the same, and some of them maybe you don't really need to spend as much as you think you do on a regular basis. And then this last column here, I've got kind of a compare. This is a calculation of, we came up with this year to date, and then we got a percentage. A couple items looks like we might have gone over. You can see that pretty easy here with the percentages. Quite a few of these went under. Maybe I was a little bit conservative in making up expenses, imaginary expenses, to come up with this sample sheet. Maybe it'd been more realistic to go over budget on a few more things. I don't know if that's just for example's sake. So this would probably be a primary thing, a sort of report that you would want to use to show to your board, make available to the other members in the organization, non-board members, because in any nonprofit, one of the primary focuses is being accountable for how you're spending and using your money and the funds. And I think that kind of is shown on a real it kind of shows when you've summarized everything for the year how exactly you're doing. So, I've got one more. I've also put together a balance sheet. Now, this isn't necessarily, I mean, for an organization of under 50,000 in annual revenues, this probably isn't absolutely necessary. It can be helpful in just simply showing this is what we have to work with. As of the end of December 2015, we had 6,180 in the bank. And that agrees with what we've got over on all our other reports. Also got $100 sitting in a cash box. I don't know what we plan to do with that, but we've prepaid some rent several years ago. There's a credit card for $100, and this just kind of gives you a snapshot as of the last day of the year. What exactly we have, what we're dealing with is what we have available to us in finances and what we owe, if anything. So I think at this point, I think that's where I want to, at the first point, open things up for any questions, if there is any.
And we have Kathy, your hand is raised.
Thanks.
Paul, maybe you could unshare your screen too.
Oh, yeah.
I like being a small head. So, in the spirit of open discussion and candor, I will confess, in my neighborhood, we don't plan all of our activities out a year in advance. We don't know when some of the things that take a lot of money are litigation, lawyers' fees for property, things that come up that we didn't know were going to come up at all in the neighborhood. We don't have a very good insight into what's going to come. We typically we haven't been doing fundraising until we have something specific to go for, and we may not know that we have that until partway in the year. So for me, it's hard to imagine us doing a very good job of planning our budget. And my question is, do any of the rest of you have that under control? And what do you do to have a good idea about what your plans are going to be?
This is Carol Porto. I have some questions too, but mostly I just write down what we need to pay. You know, like what does the CT12 cost? What does the Oregon Business Registry cost? And, you know, go through maybe last year's check register and see what did we have to pay, and kind of use that as a basis to offer, you know, the skeleton budget for the board. But not that we actually have a good working budget, but that's what I do. But not to answer your question, I can't figure out how to raise a hand. And my question is, do you count reimbursements as revenue? Like, what do you put as total revenue, like for your CT12 from those sheets that you showed us?
So I guess it depends on where the reimbursement is coming from.
Civic
So
Light,
like
the city.
from the city. Okay, that would count as revenue.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah, that would definitely count as revenue, and it would count as revenue if somebody went out, or it would count as an expense if somebody went out, did some, you know, bought some, I don't know, whatever for the organization, and then the organization reimbursed them. It would be an expense. So yeah, that was a good question, and that would count as revenue, yes.
And in-kind donations, I didn't see that in there. Are they in a separate area?
Those would definitely go in there as that's a part of your revenue. It would be a separate line item. That would it would be a separate line item, partly because, you know, it's not going to affect your cash balance at all. But yeah, in-kind donations count as revenues. The way some of the bigger places handle it, and I think it would be correct for a smaller organization to handle it this way as well, is in-kind donations are oftentimes treated as both revenues and expense, kind of at the same time. Because it's been donated, and then it doesn't affect the bottom line quite as at all that way, because it's just a freebie.
Gary's hand is up.
Yeah, okay, I'm unmuted now. Kathy, and please, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I listened, to Paul's kind of kickoff where he says we can't bring him a shoebox. I'm, myself and another person who would back me up as treasurer at West Portland Park, pretty familiar with spreadsheet. So what Paul was suggesting seemed doable. So Kathy, was your concern just, the planning column, the budgeting column, or do you and the rest think we can do something such that we're not handing Paul a shoebox, and that in return, Paul can, quickly run across the spreadsheets and, do the submittal and sign off? I kind of putting it out there. And again, Kathy, no attempt to put you on the spot, but
No, I have no problem with the spreadsheet at all. I'm just
Okay.
saying that I don't know how to come up with a budget
right.
a year in advance, because our events, we have no events planned. I mean, right now we have one that we've planned for June, but we're probably going to do something later in the year. But when we would have been putting the budget together,
Yep.
we just don't plan. We don't know when there's going to be some property thing that is objectionable. We don't know that it's coming up. We get this notice and suddenly we're doing appeals and going to
Okay.
city council and all kinds of crazy stuff that wasn't planned at all. And we have to raise the money for it then and do it quickly. And I guess I'm just asking, do others have better control to plan ahead?
I'll quickly volunteer, Kathy, that, we don't have a crystal ball over at West Portland Park either. We can put together a spreadsheet and we'd fill in, budgeted stuff just like you, as it came up. I actually had a second and more important question to put to Paul. And this has to do, Paul, with West Portland Park voted the other night to go and get D4s. You're Northwest doing business as D4, if not now, come July 1st. So, and just for total transparency, folks, here I'm the treasurer over at Sweeney. Sometimes people ask questions during that. So if we have you guys do organizational sponsorship for us. In other words, we utilize your 501c3 status. And let's say we have someone in my neighborhood who is a retired person from big corporate that is very generous with matching funds and or time writing. That money, they will never write the check to West Portland Park. They're going to write it to the organization that is holding that formal 501c3 status. So, and again, just like Kathy, no way am I here tonight to put you on the spot, much less Darlene. But if you guys could kind of put your vision out there for how that might happen. We're little old Portland Park. We're not going to set up our own 501c3. We want you guys to sponsor us, but we may have a couple of, we might land a whale, and but that whale is going to send that money at DB4 to Paul Brown's attention, or I'm sorry, the bookkeeper's attention.
Sure.
Are you guys fine with then transferring those funds down to us and, just, watching us spend it, watching us keep our records the way that you have indicated tonight? Does that sound like a fair assessment of how we should go about this?
Um,
And Carl and Darlene jump in. And again, if if this is too complex and really not relevant
Well-
for right now, understand.
I'm going to try and field this, although Darlene is probably chomping at the bit to
Okay.
do so. But we did hold, just because training kind of under my purview, we did hold a training about 2 weeks ago on fiscal sponsorship and this exact topic. And so what I would say before Darlene jumps in is this is not the forum for those questions
Okay.
that we already, and we're happy to answer those questions, but we kindly spent some money talking about hiring people to talk about this very subject and put out the invitations on fiscal sponsorship and,
Okay.
and the steps needed for. So I'll hand it over to Darlene, but that's my 2 cents.
Okay. No, my bad. We just voted on this, so so I'll go. I'm sure you got a Zoom something I can go to.
I believe we have it recorded. If not, we can certainly get you the contracts and whatnot, that the paperwork, so that so everything works. But directionally, again, I'm gonna step into Darlene's territory here for a second. I hope I don't ever step my bounds, as long as the paperwork's in order. We have no problem with fiscal sponsorship. That's what we do as an organization with many of our coalition partners.
Gary, what I would recommend is probably call me and we'll sit down. We have a fiscal sponsorship contract that we will have you sign, and we will we have two ways. Sometimes we hold the money ourselves in our account, and then sometimes we have neighborhoods set up their own account, and I receive the bank statements to keep track of how the money is being spent. But the number one thing is if you have a giant donation, it must go through a 501c3 if they are going to get a tax deduction for that donation.
Yeah, that's why I brought the whole thing up. I'm fully aware of that. I'm
Okay.
a full disclosure. I'm a 40-year veteran of Chevron, and they're very generous with time writing and matching grants.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So the next step would be, if you want that funding to come through us, and I will say, you have options of 501c3s if you do not want the money to come through us, but then you should probably talk to me, get a fiscal sponsorship contract, and let's take the next step. And for anybody in the Southwest, and I know there are 8 organizations in the Southwest that will need fiscal sponsorship. So, and I frankly have not heard from any of you seriously about that money transferring to NWNW. So,
Okay. All right, Darlene. So now you understand why I asked the question tonight.
yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Paul, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on to that.
No, it sounds like all the relevant points were raised on that issue. So I don't have anything else on that.
No, and just to let you guys know, if I understood my board at West Portland Park correctly, we'll offer to do the Route 2, the second option that you've pointed out there, Darlene. We're pretty positive. We think we can we think we can track our expenses and everything the way Paul has set up tonight. And I've talked too much. I'll go back on mute. And
I think looks like Miriam has a question.
Not a question, more of a comment, that through the fiscal sponsorship, you do need to provide detailed receipts of the expenditures in order to be reimbursed by NWNW. So it is a secondary step to what Paul has already said. Your record keeping is one thing, providing additional details to NWNW for reimbursement, in a sense, is required.
Thank you, Miriam. Right on.
All right, well, unless there's any more questions regarding record keeping and bookkeeping, I'm gonna move on to my second section of this, which is kind of talking about the tax document preparation and filing. Go ahead. I see your hands up, Rob.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask if there's some of the neighborhood associations have earmarked accounts for one thing or another. Do those show up in the, in your monthly reports?
Yes, those would. You would put a separate line item for anything that you wanted to show up in your reports. You would put a separate line item for anything you would want to highlight.
And
So
I'd like to add here, if you're operating with a grant, first of all, the grant will have restrictions on how you can spend that money. And so if your revenues are grant related, then that is the main thing, is to make sure that those expenditures are tagged to that grant, and those expenditures are exactly what you said that money would be spent on.
Okay, thanks.
welcome.
And some neighborhoods have 5 or 6 grants that are fully operational at any point in time. So tracking those funds against those grants is absolutely key.
Any other questions?
Not seeing any more.
All right. So let's go on to the next agenda item that I had there, which is the tax document preparation and filing. Now the first, and this you'll see on page 1 under the agenda, the first couple items there are things that get filed with the IRS. First of all, you have your 1099s, and that's kind of something that I think is easy to forget about, but that is something that is must be done every January. It doesn't matter what your fiscal year is; those have to be filed by the end of January, and those are made out to any person or a non-corporation that was paid $600 or more for the year for non-wage services. So, and there's some, I think there were some questions raised with me earlier this year as to certain things. Paying out a grant to somebody is not something that needs a 1099 filed for. But if somebody came out to your office and was doing some repairs on the roof, and they're not a corporation, then they would get issued a 1099. This is not person to person, but it's organization paying money to a person or an organization paying money to another organization that's not a corporation. Sometimes it can be a little hard to know, is this place doing, that's doing business as Jones and Sons, are they a corporation? Well, you kind of have to ask them and find out. You would have to get, for a 1099, you would have to get their employer identification number if they had one, or a social security number. And so I think in the process of doing that, you might find out, oh, they're a corporation and that you don't need to have a 1099 issued to them. Those are required to be filed electronically. Yes, there's a question I see from Thomas.
Sorry. Yeah, so what you were just saying about the 1099, it depends on the kind of organization we're paying.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Okay, so who are we not concerned about?
If it's a corporation, you don't have to issue them a 1099.
The reason I'm asking is we just paid a vendor for some plaques that were installed in the park blocks. And so, and that was over $1,700. So, and so Darlene said we should get I think a W-9, which we did get from them. So I have their tax ID, but that's sufficient. I don't need a 1099 to file a 1099 for them down the road.
Probably not, because what the transaction you had there was you were buying stuff from them and not buying services.
Right.
So if you had,
Although we did sign a contract though.
if you had
But
purchased those plaques separately, and then you went to somebody to have them do the work of engraving the plaques, you wouldn't issue a 1099 to the place that you bought the plaques from, but you would issue a 1099 to the person that you had do the engraving work, if that makes sense.
because that's a service.
It's,
Okay.
yeah, it's very, 1099s are actually fairly tricky because there's a lot of rules. And if it happens to be a lawyer that you're making the payments to, I think the minimum is not 600, it's $10. So I guess they really want to know what those lawyers are earning.
How are we supposed to know that, Paul? If it's a
Or are you
lawyer is
supposed to know?
$10, if a lawyer is $10 and another service provider is over 600, how do we know that lawyers are only $10? Is that?
Maybe because I just said so.
Yeah. Okay.
You can, I mean, so the IRS does have a publication that gives instructions for 1099s, and it'll give information as to who needs to receive one. And sometimes even reading those IRS instructions, it might not be very clear. So I'm happy to answer questions or about that if they come up. Yes, Kathy.
So theoretically, let's say 5 years ago, we had a dispute where we had to hire a lawyer and it was $1,000, but we didn't file that particular form. Do we need to go back?
No. No, not at this point. Yeah, the IRS is a little slow as far as, they put together this whole arrangement of penalties that they can levy against people for not filing 1099s, but they haven't really got in place the it's a little hard for them to, say who all needs to do that. They don't audit everything 100%, and so if you miss one 5 years ago, it's not going to get picked up on, most likely.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Theoretically, of course.
Yep.
And
Go
Carol
ahead, Carol.
has
So the 1099 doesn't go to the IRS, it goes to the lawyer.
It
Or the
goes to
person
the
who's been reported.
IRS and it goes to the lawyer.
So you have to fill out 2 copies of the same thing?
That's correct. Yeah.
Is there
Now,
a
one of the
cost?
things I was going to add about 1099s is those are required to be done electronically. So there are online, there's a variety of packages where you can get 1099s prepared, or you can go to some place, to have them done professionally. We do a lot of 1099s during January. But what will happen is when the 1099 is prepared through whatever software company it's done, they will simultaneously prepare a form to be sent to the IRS and a form to be sent to the individual.
Is there a cost if you do it yourself and then go to the IRS website or something?
Yeah, I've looked online for some places where you can do 1099s for free, but I haven't found it. So there's some kind of cost. Maybe about I think it's been a couple years since I've looked into it. So it was maybe the lowest I saw was maybe around $20 per form. Maybe less than that. That's not 1099s are not something that I personally do a lot of work on. But we do quite a few 1099s here at the firm I work at.
So come January 2025, we'll fill out 1099s for services paid in 2024.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Bummer.
All right, well, the next form then I want to talk about is the 990. And the 990 is the basic form that would be filed with the IRS. Now, you've got 3 levels of Form 990s, and for any organization that has less than $50,000 of revenues per year, they would fill out a 990N. Page 8, let me go ahead and share this screen. Okay, this is an example of a Form 990N. Really simple. It gives the name of the organization, the employer identification number, the address and phone number, and the contact person. So in a lot of cases, this is such an easy form that I think there's a lot of organizations that probably could be filling these out themselves. In fact, you can go to the IRS website and do it for free. So that's a pretty simple item. Now, if the organization grows and is pulling in more than $50,000 a year, but not more than 200,000 a year, then they would file. Go ahead with the question.
Oh,
Rita,
hi, thanks, Paul. If we are not a 501c3, do we have to do a 990?
if you're not a 501c3, nope. You don't
Okay,
have to
thank you.
file a 990.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Yep. So, and I think most of the people that I'm talking to in this class would be likely to do a 990N, would probably be the most complicated 990 that would be filing. You wouldn't need to do the EZ form or I think most all would be under 50,000 in annual revenues. But if they did grow to over 50,000, they would fill out the 990 EZ. And this is a little bit different. It's about a 4-page form. It asks for a little more. It asks for some detailed financial information, names of the officers. There's a couple pages of questions. And that would be it for that. There might be some additional schedules that would have to be filed with that. Now, if an organization grew even bigger than that, they would fill out the 990 form, which is a 12-page, and so I haven't attached it to here's to show as an example. It'd be a 12-page minimum form at a minimum, and then there would be most likely several other schedules attached to it. Now it looked like I didn't get in the materials I put together, it looks like I didn't get the copy of the CT12, which I'm a little surprised. Anyway, I missed that. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, Paul, on the 990N, Homestead's been doing that because we've been a 501c3 for about 3 years now or more. And my only concern, and we've done this Form 990N every year, how did you get a printout of that document? Because I find the IRS website to be awkward, confusing, and very difficult because I've got my personal kind of e-connections to the IRS, and they have something called an ID.me, I think it is, ID me. And I was having a rough time getting on as the homestead rep because I was using, anyway, it's a pain. You fill it out and there's no printable receipt. And in this year, I didn't get any documentation back from the IRS proving that I had filed. So I'm kind of in a never land right now. I know I filled it out. I know I followed the instructions. I know I did it, but if someone were to ask me and if I were to get an audit, I'm not sure how I'd be able to prove it. It's no big deal. I'm not worried about it. I'm just kind of a heads up for those of you who've never used it. I think it's difficult. What's been your experience, and is there a way I can go in, you think, and actually get documentation of the fact that we filed?
I don't know of one. You know, the IRS is kind of a black hole.
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And they want, it's kind of funny now, to be honest with you, with that Form 990N, they only require that to be filed once every 3 years. Now, we have most places that do those, we have them file it every year just to be sure, that we aren't missing a year. I have seen an organization many years ago that, they missed filing their 990N for at least 3 years. And so the IRS said that sent out a letter saying that their nonprofit status was revoked. That's what they'll do. The only purpose really of that 990N is to be able to say to the IRS, we still exist as an organization. But if you want to get a copy of that form, what you would need to do is, when you file it, print out a copy at that time, first of all, if possible.
I tried that. I didn't do a screen capture and then print the screen. In hindsight, maybe I should have. No big deal. I also read, like you just said, that if you file it within 3 years, you keep going and you get a 3-year start again. But if you wait 4 years, then your status may be revoked or something as a nonprofit.
Yep. Yep.
Anyway, thank you.
They'll send you a letter. They'll send you a letter if they're revoking your status.
Okay.
Although you don't want to get one of those letters, I don't think.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Now, if you do,
Paul, my bad. I think I just muted you. Sorry.
okay. Now I'm on again.
Yes, sorry.
So if you do want to get information, like find a copy of your 990N, one of the ways you can do that is the Oregon Department of Justice Charitable Activities Division. Every year we have to file a CT-12 with them. When you file the CT-12, you're supposed to attach a copy of the 990N, if that's what you filed. And they have a database on their website where I can go and look up, anybody, it's free public access. You can look up any organization that's doing any charitable activity in Oregon, in the state of Oregon, and you can find out whether they have, whether they are up to date on their CT-12s. They'll have a copy in there of their CT-12, and the final, the CT-12 really is only a 2-page document, but then after those 2 pages, the very first thing that's attached to it is going to be a copy of whatever they filed in the way of 990N or 990EZ. And so that would be a way you can look back in the past and see if you got those 990Ns filed.
So I have to ask, sorry, we're supposed to be filing the 990s with the CT-12s?
That's correct.
Whoops. We've been on our own since we kind of divorced ourselves from Sweeney a 3 years ago, and I don't think I've ever sent a copy of the 990 with the CT-12, but the state's never said anything to us.
It says if it's available.
Oh, okay.
It seemed to me, now maybe I'll end up in jail, but it seemed to me that it was optional.
Okay.
That's probably correct. I think they recognize that organizations that file 990Ns, they don't have to file one every year, so they might have a
Okay.
couple of years where they don't file that, and so they aren't gonna expect the 990N every single year.
Okay, we'll look into it. Thanks.
So now the next thing I want to shift over to talking about is the CT12, which for most organizations with under 50,000 in annual revenues, that's going to be probably because the 990N is there's almost nothing to it. The CT12, it's got quite a bit more. Comparatively, it's got quite a bit more to it. There's 2 pages. I was going to include a copy in the materials that I sent out, and I missed that somehow, so I apologize for that. But the CT12, and the Oregon Department of Justice will mail out on an annual basis a blank one, to every organization, as far as I know. You can also download copies, blank copies from the website. Those start out with the organization number, the number that they've been assigned by the Charitable Activities Division, and then the name of the organization and the address. There's some questions about whether you've had an audit over the last year. There's some things like that. And then it asks who holds the records, which most likely would be your treasurer. And then it asks for a list of officers. Now, you really only have to fill out the 3 positions that they show there. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, so we're down on at the bottom part of this form, the first page. The list of officers. Let's go back up just a little bit. Yeah, right there. List of officers. You really only have to list 3 there. You can't, if you want to, you can attach an extra page that gives all the names of the people on your board. I don't think that that's absolutely necessary. So you would give their name, a mailing address, daytime phone number, and email address. So when I've been filling these out for a lot of the neighborhood organizations, I fill out what I can get a hold of. If I've got a name, a position, somebody's president, I kind of assume that they're not getting paid for it. And sometimes I'll just have an email address for them. And that's all I'll put in. Maybe I'll put the organization, the Neighbors West Northwest District 4 address in there, but oftentimes we'll just leave it blank. I just fill in what I have. So let's go down here. We're going on to the second page, and it shows the fee calculation. Now the first line there, they ask your total revenue. That's where, so the record keeping that we've done, we've figured out over the course of the year that with the example I gave there back on page 6, they received $24,000 for the year. So that's the amount that would go on line 9, $24,000. And then the next item, revenue fee, they give you a chart. And this works out pretty well, the $24,000 in revenue means they've got to pay the minimum $20 fee. Now, anything over $25,000, obviously it goes up the amount of fee you are going to be putting on line 10. Line 11 is your net assets, which is basically it's how much cash you have. Checking, savings, all of that. If you have some other, some other assets in addition to that, that might make a difference in the amount that you would put on that line. But that is basically what your net assets is. And if, let's see, looking down at line 13, if the net assets is less than 50,000, you would put in a 0. Your fee calculated on line 13 is 0. So 13 and 14. And then there's a question of whether you're filing late. Now, if you filed an extension, that doesn't count as late. So late means after the due date and you missed filing an extension, or you filed an extension but now it's past even that extended due date. They have a minimum late fee of $20. That can go up. What happens is when the Charitable Activities Division gets these CT12s, when they get them late, they send out notices and they say, well, you were X number of days late, so you're going to need to pay an extra, whatever it might be. It's going to depend on the number of days late. So it's best to get those in on time, because then you just have $20 basically. That's what you're probably going to end up with on line 16. Making out a check to the Oregon Department of Justice, and then it gets signed, and item 17 here talks about attaching the 990 or 990N, and it recognizes it's talking about it here that if the organization did not file with the IRS or a 990N, it'll give some instructions as to what to do. I think we've got a 2-page form here that you actually file, and then there's another 6 pages of instructions. Sometimes I've referred to those instructions, but most of the time I haven't, so I don't know. I haven't had a chance to memorize those yet, but they're there to refer to if needed.
And folks,
So
I've
you
shared
gotta-
a link. Sorry, Paul. I've shared a link to this file in the chat, so you can access it there.
Good,
Look at
good,
it.
thank you. You have a question, Rob?
Paul, can you go over the due dates for this CT12?
Yeah. So the due dates for the 990, 990N, and 990EZ and the CT12 are 4 months and 15 days after your fiscal year ends. So if the fiscal year ends June 30th, the due date is November 15th. If the fiscal year ends on December 31st, then the due date is May 15th. Now, in all of those cases, you can extend them for 6 months. So in which case, I've had a couple CT12s that I just got taken care of for fiscal years ending June 30th of last year. Got those filed as of May 15th of this year because they were extended and took a little longer to get the information in. Now, it looks like the next thing I was gonna go into was filing fees. And I've kind of hit on that a little bit already. All of the forms that you would file with the IRS, the 1099s, the 990N, 990 EZ, and 990, there's no fee to be paid to the IRS. Now, if you were to file those things late, after due dates or after extended due dates, they might levy a penalty. I don't think they levy a penalty for the 990N. I think they just wait the 3-year period and then revoke your charitable status. So, but for the CT12, it's a minimum filing fee of $20. It goes up depending on the amount of revenues that the organization has, the amount of assets, and whether or not it's late. And I think I've mentioned already too that the Oregon Department of Justice might levy penalties for late or non-filing as well. So go ahead, Carol.
Isn't there also some state of Oregon business registry you have to do every year?
Most likely. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That would be through the Secretary of State's office. And I think I think that's probably not any more complicated than the 990N, but they charge you, I think, $100 for that, or 150, something like that.
$50. I can't remember. I thought it was 50.
That'd be good. It's better than 100. So are there any other questions on tax filings, or even going back to bookkeeping and record keeping?
Miriam, I was wondering if you had anything to add since you are in nonprofit books every day. Do you have any thoughts of anything that you would like to add?
I would ask if anybody is involved with restricted funds versus unrestricted funds. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you probably haven't been exposed to it.
Yeah.
Mike?
So just a couple of comments. First of all, Miriam's been very helpful in the chat. She's been posting some additional information. So if you haven't looked at the chat, everyone, there's some really good stuff there. And then in answer to your question, by restricted funds, like if we have a separate account that was donated just for use, like in the park, is that what you mean by a restricted fund?
Yeah, if it was a restricted fund, it would be somebody gives you a donation and they say this needs to be used for this specific purpose. So that's a restricted fund. It has to be used for exactly what the donor says it's to be used for.
Okay, and what are the implications on what we're talking about tonight in terms of sending in reports?
There would not be a lot of difference in the tax filings that you would make. There would be in the reporting that you would do. with the board, because I think you would want to have a separate, probably a whole separate column
Right.
for those restricted funds. How much of it was spent, and being able to show the exact purpose that it, being able to show that it was being spent for, on what it was supposed to be spent on.
Okay.
Those would be your grants, for example, are usually or almost always restricted funds. You have to spend them a very specific way. It's the best example I can think of.
And one point I came across several times this past year is that individual donors provided funds for a very specific purpose. And if those funds are not used for that purpose, you have to go back to the donor and ask them permission to move those funds to your general spending category. And if they say no, you've got to give the money back. So as many donations as can go into a general fund, the better off you are. So.
And for those that are not 501c3s that are generating these kinds of revenues, again, that's why if you are tied to NWNW and we are a fiscal sponsor, that's one of the reasons why I ask for copies of your bank statements, or even in a lot of cases, I ask to even be on the account, because I like to take a look at everything that's coming out of that account because of these rules. So that's one of the reasons why if you have a fiscal sponsor, they will want to see how you're spending those monies, because restricted funds can get you in trouble in a big way. Whether it's a private donor or whether it's a grantor, they do expect those funds to be spent according to how they, or why they donated the money.
My experience has said that the more oversight, the better for 501c3s.
Absolutely. Yep.
Miriam, you're muted. Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question. Several times board members want to know what a specific donor gave as a dollar amount. Are there any rules and regulations towards that specific information being given to board members?
I'm gonna answer as best I can on that. If they are donating money to a public organization, a public nonprofit, then I would say that that information can be shared, unless the donor gave the funds anonymously, and then that naturally you would want to keep that from as few people as possible. But for public facing organizations like PD&A, for example, I would say that it's okay to share that information unless the donor says that you should not.
And Rita, you have your hand raised.
Oh, thank you. This is kind of on another track. So if we need to finish that Miriam's question, if anybody else wants to chime in, I can wait. But my question was about fiscal years. What goes into deciding whether you're going to do a calendar year or a June 30th fiscal year end? I'm thinking to align with the city and any grants and any programs that floated out. A June 30th fiscal year end would be helpful, but it seems like a lot of people go with calendar year. Are there any considerations to which one we choose?
Paul, this is a good question for you, I think, because you did all of our taxes last year. Everybody was on the fiscal year of June 30th to July 1, right?
Yep.
I mean, July 1 to June 30th.
Yep.
Okay.
It's kind of a it's kind of a hard question to answer though. Um, the, so when you are organizing with the IRS, you're supposed to at that time determine what your fiscal year is going to be. And their general rule is that it's supposed to follow the natural business cycle, which I mean that's kind of hard to define. But if the city is on a June 30th year end fiscal year, and since your organizations in a lot of cases may get funding from the city, it makes sense to follow the same fiscal year of June 30th. I find that most, I mean, I would say 75 to 80% of nonprofits that I work with are on a June 30th fiscal year.
It's interesting.
It's kind of nice and convenient for me because then it means, you know, I'm really busy early part of the year until April 15th, and then people file extensions, and then I'm really busy again around October 15th, and then after October 15th and before November 15th, I have my nonprofits. But of course, fiscal years aren't necessarily supposed to be determined based on what's convenient for the accountant. So, but yeah, that's kind of a general overview of what I've seen and what seems to be most convenient for most people.
Great, thank you. And I want to just make a comment about the CT12 when we filed this year. Also, when I filed last year, I tried to change the name and address and contact information. And it came back again this year with the same old information. So I tried it again this year. I was on the portal. It got an email, said it confirmed. The form still came out with the old information. So I emailed them and they said, oh yeah, we have a bug. We don't know. Some people's organizations, it just won't let you change it. And she would change it for me. So just in case anybody else has that problem, I don't know why we did, but there is some kind of a bug. And then you can just email them and they'll fix it. So that was nice.
So Marita, when they formed a nonprofit at Maplewood was before I was involved in it. They chose a calendar year, and I think whoever did it didn't even think about it. They just checked the box. And
yeah,
I think if I were to do it over, I mean, I thought about changing it, but once it's set at the IRS, it's a pain in the tocus to change your fiscal year. So I just left it sit. But I think if it would have been me, I would have left it as a fiscal year, which is what you're on now.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good to know.
Rob, you have your hand raised?
I sort of hesitate to bring this up because, but I will say that I did attend the training on the 501c3. So I think from that standpoint, I should be able to ask this. We're a very small neighborhood. We very unlikely to get any donations that someone's going to get a tax benefit from. And so we decided we would not become a 501c3 and don't think we really need 501c3 status through Neighbors West and Northwest. So what are we?
Well, you are registered with the
State.
Oregon Department of Justice Charitable Activities Division, correct?
Yes.
Then you are an Oregon nonprofit.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the way to refer about ourselves properly as an Oregon nonprofit.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Which means that you do have to file the CT12, Rob.
Right. Yeah. And yes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions, folks?
This is Gary Rundy. I think I'm off mute. Darlene, that was a nice conversation there with Rob. I think there's a point to drive home that we have to have that recognized at the Oregon Department of Justice for you to hand out the insurance certificate. That's a fair statement?
Yes, actually, it's kind of an in-house rule more than anything because it keeps our premiums down. If the insurance company can look at you and see that you're not just a random organization out there.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's helpful.
Okay, I
And I
actually thought
believe
it
that
would.
all of our neighborhoods are organized as Oregon nonprofits minimally, and a lot, except for 11 of you, are fiscally sponsored organizations, just Oregon nonprofits.
We have a question from Ed.
Yeah, hi. I've always wondered this, but there's another state filing that we do, and that's with the Secretary of State's office, and it's our annual report. Do we have to do that in order to be considered a nonprofit corporation eligible for 501c3? That's a $50 a year fee. Any thoughts on that, or were you going to talk about that at all?
Well, it's a Secretary of State filing, which actually makes you a corporation. That's where you define yourself as an Oregon corporation with the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
The Revenue Office is the one that you have to file your CT-12 with as an Oregon nonprofit.
Well, it's
So,
actually the Department of Justice.
yeah, the Department of Justice. That's correct. There was another part to your question, though.
Well, do we have to have, I mean, if we're filing the CT-12 and we're filing the
Secretary of
the
State.
990 for federal, do we, I guess we have to have the annual report with the Secretary of State's office to qualify to
Yeah.
even make those other two filings?
That's correct.
I've always thought that was like the Department of Redundancy department, but okay, that's just the way it is.
Of your natural guard.
Yeah.
Sorry. Not too many of us on here probably recognize that.
Hey, Rob, did you have a question?
Wait a minute. I want to say something else. Ed, in the past, the coalitions have always picked up that filing fee with the Secretary of State. And I think that that's something the city expects that we will continue to do.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, since we became a 501c3, we've been doing it ourselves. But then, we took our finances away from Sweeney too, and we've got our independent bank accounts as well.
Good,
so
good.
We're quite independent. But I'm looking forward to working with you, Darlene, to find out how we proceed in the future. Things may be different. Our expenses may be less than others in terms of what your efforts are going to be to do all the proper filings. And we may want to change our address because we're spending now because of the requirement for the 501c3, and because we didn't want to burden any one specific officer in our organization by having their address, their physical address, be the one we submit. We're paying $200 a year for a post office address, post office box, which seems like a waste of money, frankly.
You are most welcome to use our address, not a problem with that. And I know a lot of neighborhoods do. The issue comes though when I get all the mail and then nobody comes to get it. And so that's the one thing that I'm kind of trying to get my head around. I mean, if you're on our board, then you can pick up envelopes every month with, your neighborhood association's name on it. But if you're not coming by and picking up the mail, then I'm left in a quandary as to what I should be doing with it. So absolutely plan on using our address if you need it, but also plan to talk with us, to talk with me about how you want that information sent to you, how you are going to actually receive that information. Are you going to come in to pick it up? I mean, we have potential for mailboxes for all of the neighborhoods here. But if neighborhoods aren't going to use that system, then we'll figure out something else.
Okay, thank you.
And Rob?
I think I just answer my own question, but I hate to ask this, but I was wondering whether or not the city reimburse or paying for our insurance is some sort of a in-kind income, but it wouldn't be because they're paying for it, right?
Right. Right. We're
Any other
really,
questions?
we're really trying to work through ways right now where we can still give you all the services. It just may not be as convenient as it always has been. For example, you know, I won't get into a lot of the details about what we're parsing through here. I did send out a scope of work today, by the way, if anybody took a look at it. We'll probably go to some amount of scheduling. So instead of, you know, everybody having access to Carl and I for sure 100% of the time, all the time through emails and such, some things we may go into a scheduling process. So on some days, we're only going to be dealing with certain things and then be open the rest of the week. We just have to figure out a way to do everything and do it more efficiently.
Marita.
Hi, yeah, I was wondering if you have any template forms, like for best practices on when somebody requests reimbursement or requests, you know, payment of a bill, or just kind of record keeping best practice forms.
Well, all of our forms are generated out of QuickBooks. All of our invoices and receipts are generated out of QuickBooks. So we don't actually have a form like that, but if that's something that you would like to see happen, we can probably pull that together. It's not a difficult task. Miriam? I look at Miriam because Miriam is a awesome bookkeeper.
What I require of anyone wanting a reimbursement is an electronic receipt or a paper receipt, a reimbursement form that I'm happy to share with you guys, as
Great.
well as a W-9. That way, if the IRS were ever to come back to me, I would have that documentation. It's overkill. Like, I shouldn't need a W-9 form, but at least I have the information should it come back to haunt me.
Miriam, if you don't mind
Yeah.
sharing that little packet of information, I know that there are people on this call that would love to have that little
Yeah,
packet.
Miriam, if you could shoot it to me, I'm happy to. I have everybody's email here on the registration, and I can shoot it out tomorrow.
Sure.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very
Thank you.
generous. You gonna let us
Paul?
out early? Paul, you gonna let us out early?
Well, I don't have anything more, and unless people have more questions, I think we can probably wrap it up.
I just have one more question, that when we come together again before we file our taxes, especially on the CT12, do you think it's possible that people could bring their records, come together, everybody have their CT12, and we collectively fill it out with you by our side?
Have kind of a CT party.
Yeah, CT12 party.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that's
I think that would be a great idea.
okay. All right. I think we'll try to do something like that. That way everybody gets them done, and that's out of our way. Good. Good. Okay, guys, any other questions? Guys and ladies and us and thems. Got anything else you want to share? Questions you want to ask? I will say that up to this point, I've pretty much allowed open access to Paul and to our attorney. I'm going to allow that as long as there's no abuse going on. But if I start getting bills from Paul for $10,000 for one neighborhood, I'm not going to, you're cut off. But Paul is our accountant. Each of you may have a question here, a question there. I'm going to go okay with that. But when the bills start coming in, then we'll figure out that we can't do that anymore and we'll figure out something else. And then all questions will have to come through me, which I don't necessarily think that's a good idea either all the time, but
I have a
So-
question.
was that you,
Go
Carol?
ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if this is relevant to this talk, but in coming in the next months, is Civic Life giving you money for the neighborhood associations? Or I don't know if they're gonna reimburse us for stuff anymore after May 31st. But if they are they gonna continue doing it directly, or is it gonna be when we join the coalition through the coalition?
Well, I'll say
Any
it's a good.
idea? I mean, I have no idea. I just learned we're
My
not getting
understanding
any
is
more.
all
Yeah.
of the funding for neighborhood associations is going to come through the coalition. Like it was when you guys had a full-on coalition. That's the way it's always been.
Right.
I would like to, if any of you just want to, frankly, for the hell of it, I have had a few neighborhoods do this and I'm finding it very helpful at this point. If you could write down the things that you are accustomed to being reimbursed for and send me that list. And if you can, even better, estimated amounts that you were reimbursed for certain things. Because the city run associations of neighborhoods are operated very differently. And each of the neighborhoods had to submit invoices to the city, then the city reimbursed. That's not how it goes through a coalition. But I would like to know the costs that you're incurring and how much you're incurring.
Okay.
And somebody from one neighborhood association sent me that. I think it worked out to be around 800 and some dollars, but I think it's actually more than that if we add in all of our subscription costs and such. And for some neighborhoods, it's way more than that. So, yeah, I'd just like to know that because Carol, you asked that question and it's kind of an interesting question for me to hear our neighborhood's going to be reimbursed directly because that's not something I'm accustomed to hearing. Unless, I mean, we do reimburse for many, many things, but to be asked if the city's going to reimburse directly, that was an odd thing to my ear.
Hey, Darlene, could you
Yeah.
please address Zoom and how we might be, right now we share a couple of Zoom accounts in Sweeney and it's something we're gonna need to do.
Yeah,
Darlene, do you want me to jump into that?
Carl, why don't you jump into this?
Yeah, I'll jump into that. So we recognize Zoom is incredibly important in this day and age for conducting your committee meetings and board meetings remotely. And we are currently looking at a plan. Hopefully by next month we'll turn it on where we'll have up to 99 users. So each NA will have at least one, maybe two, probably maybe your president and secretary or your chair and vice chair or whatever that will have access to a Zoom account, and we'll manage that. The only kind of hiccup there is that we will be the administrators of it, and so when you have a new chair or a new vice chair, when there's change in the organization, we need to be informed so we can set up the new user, to log in. So there'll be a little bit of a bottleneck around election times for us, but we hope to have that in place certainly July 1st, maybe sooner than that.
That's really great news. Thanks.
That's good news. What about websites? Would you host websites?
So, Darlene, do you want me to take that as well?
Yeah, the only thing that I'm going to say about this is I'm going to say yes, that we plan on doing that. However, it's the technical assistance that is most expensive for us. So yes, we can help you with your websites, but upkeep on those websites and how often you get access to IT services through us, That's where the scheduling part's coming in. So if
Yeah.
you have your website go down, right now with our little 11 neighborhoods, Carl jumps right on it, can assist in a heartbeat, but that's not going to be it in the future. It's just going to be
I-
a little more scheduled. Go
But-
ahead,
I don't
Carl.
think,
But you'll
I don't
host
think-
one.
I don't think that that was the actual question. I think the actual question was whether we will host websites. And we will not. That exceeds our mandate by the city and our budget. What we will do is have a robust coalition site with a page for each of your neighborhood associations. And within that page, have your calendar, have whatever content you think is relevant, and an easy way to update that content. Of course, your board meetings and committee meetings, schedules, Zoom links,
And then a
little
link.
summary of your neighborhood, that type of thing. But if you're talking about a standalone website that we curate, I would love to be able to say yes, but we don't have the money for that from the city, and
Okay.
so that's going away. We do have a couple questions here. I think Ed, your hand was first, so
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Darlene, that's an excellent suggestion that you just made, that all the neighborhoods provide you some sort of, I guess I use the term budget, but expected expenses and a list of those expenses. I would hope that you would ask that of all of the neighborhoods that are going to be in District 4. And my question to you is, when would you like that? What would you set for a due date for us?
As soon as possible. I would say by the end of, by May 27th, when all of your insurance is also due.
Okay, will do. All right, thank you.
and Mike?
Carl, just what you were talking about, two things. First of all, I think it's great that you're going to have a page for each neighborhood. That's really a lot of what we need. The other thing is on the Zoom accounts with 33 neighborhoods, we're bound to have some evenings where multiple neighborhoods have meetings at the same time. Will you have more than one Zoom account?
So again, this is this would be a business, it's not Business Pro, it's a business plus account. So multiple meetings, as long as they're set up by different licensed users, and we would have it up to 99. So in theory, God forbid, we could have 99 parallel meetings going at once, as long as they're been set up by different users. Now, that would be a stretch, but yeah. So I mean, for example, if we zoom down a little smaller, the existing account that NWNW has, Darlene has an account, or is a registered user, and I am. And there are plenty of times where Darlene's doing her meeting on Zoom and I'm doing mine. That's fine. Where we run into problem is when my account is being used for two meetings in parallel. Then you have a cluster. What?
Yeah,
but
it won't let us play.
But this would not be that. As long as each neighborhood association through their account is setting up their Zoom, it doesn't matter. We could have 99 at once. It wouldn't matter.
And we would have that link ahead of time, obviously, to send out to everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You would just log into Zoom.
You
like
would have your
currently
own,
do.
it would be kind of like your own account, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Darlene, you can scratch the Zoom off the budget list I sent you.
Okay, good.
Kathy, you have your
Mike,
hand
you were the one
raised?
that sent me the list. That was good. That was very helpful.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand about the website. So Arlington Heights currently has a website that we've been using through you. So is that going away on June 30th?
Yeah, Kathy, we're gonna have to figure that out. There, a big part of course, my job is are those websites, right? And maintaining them. And they are currently under our WordPress
Exactly.
umbrella. So nobody's gonna shut them off tomorrow, but we're going to have to come up with a strategy on how to transfer ownership of those to you guys, and and kind of accommodate to the new budgeting that we have from the city and how to, it's again, there's nothing, I think, certainly myself, but Darlene, I'm sure would agree, like, to keep things the way they are, but we're going from 11 to 32 neighborhoods and websites. And there are incurred costs there that are pretty dramatic, and we just haven't gotten the money from the city to be able to scale up, for that amount of websites. So we're going to need to make some changes, and if you don't like those changes, we don't like them either, but I would make don't talk to us about it. Call the mayor.
So I get that, but I guess I think that there should be discussion at your board level with the neighborhoods about what services get cut and what services don't get cut. I don't think it should just be a unilateral decision.
I hear you on that, Kathy. And, even hearing Carl talk about it makes me very, very nervous to even hear the words. It's not really, I mean, yes, you're right. We should talk to our board about it, but when it comes right down to it, it's priorities, and you're right. And
well, the board should set the priorities, right?
well, the way the board is going to is, here's the thing. Our neighborhoods in Neighbors West Northwest have certain advantages that the Southwest neighborhoods do not have. So the Southwest neighborhoods are coming in with a certain set of services that they are used to getting, which are quite different than the services that NWNW has been delivering to its neighbors. Pulling those together is pretty important right now. Websites are something that are causing us great consternation, just like not having the money to pay Paul to do everyone's taxes is causing a little great consternation. Yeah, I'll just throw this out here, and I'm not being flip about it because I've wanted to say this anyway tonight. If anybody knows a benefactor that can come up with 20 grand, we can give Paul all of our taxes to do and be done with it. But if we don't have that benefactor that's going to subsidize us at the tune of 20 grand, then we have to figure out how to use Paul more effectively. It's kind of the same with the websites. We got an additional $8,000 to take on 30 neighborhoods. We can't even hire an additional staff person to handle the situation. We don't even have enough money to hire one more staff person, but yet we have 33 neighborhoods. So all I'm saying, Kathy, is we want to give you the services that you're accustomed to, but we may not be able to afford all the services.
And Darlene, I think there's actually one other important point to kind of bring up. This was actually something that that Haley from the mayor's office made us aware of within the city's expectations. This wasn't something that you and I decided. This was something explicitly that the mayor's office said, that our grant.
We were told basically we weren't going to do websites anymore, Kathy. That's the bottom line from the city. We're going to try to figure out a way to provide you the services that you need. Especially IT troubleshooting for websites. That's something that maybe we can pull in either through volunteers or services from somebody that we find to sponsor our websites. I don't know what to tell you, Kathy, except we're trying. We're trying to find all other avenues of funding for the NAs. And my greatest hope would be that each of you sitting on this call and your boards would be trying to find additional revenues for NAs as well, whether it be for yourself or whether it be for the coalition to share. We are drastically in need of additional revenues. And I'm sorry if we are making you angry in this discussion. I certainly don't mean to, and I completely understand it because, I mean, Carl will tell you, I spend a lot of time in this office just yelling at people because we're not getting funded appropriately. And it's one thing to sit around a board table and say, oh, we're not going to be able to provide these services. But when the rubber meets the road is where the heartbreak is. And that's when people really understand it. I have been saying for months now that services were going to have to be cut. And nobody really heard me, I guess. I don't know.
Well, so here's another question. I heard that the southeast neighborhoods are going to stay with southeast. So doesn't that mean that those neighborhoods are not a part of our funding situation?
That's correct. That is correct. We'll be losing 4 neighborhoods, possibly. We don't know if the city's going to approve that, Kathy. We don't know if that's an actual move. That's just one more little twist, you know, all of a sudden, maybe they're going and maybe they're not. We don't know. And I'm still trying to find the revenue to pay for insurance. Do I pay for insurance for them or do I not? You know, do I include them in my budget or do I not? You know, because those decisions are somewhere in the wind right now. But 4 neighborhoods, and that goes back to, let's just say, what is that? 4 neighborhoods. It could be $12,000 per neighborhood. It could be $1,000 per neighborhood. So, you know, if it's 4 neighborhoods, then let's just say we're $48,000 richer.
And there's a couple comments in the chat I just wanted to kind of chime in on because I think they're important. Someone brought up about MailChimp is free. Yes, it is free up until 2,500 folks, unless you have more than one user on your account, and then it will trigger to a billed account that is non-retroactive. You can't go back to your free account. So
Please
neighborhoods.
be careful about that too, because I pay X amount for a MailChimp account, but I have a couple of neighborhoods for no apparent reason. I'm paying twice as much because they didn't contact us. It triggered a separate account and now I'm paying twice as much for one neighborhood that I'm paying for the entire coalition. So
That's absolutely, yeah. So that's right. So MailChimp is free. That doesn't cost anything. But if you trigger it to have more than one user, it will cost you $27.90 a month or whatever. And then the other thing is SharePoint. SharePoint isn't going away. We have SharePoint for our archives for all of our existing coalition partners and presumably as of July 1st, all of the Southwest folks, where minutes, agendas, your governing documents, all that stuff will be shared, and that's not going away. But what will go away is the WordPress site, the domain registration, the IT firewall, or the firewall to protect your site, all that stuff. We're going to have to retool that. Again, there will be a more robust page on the NW. Well, it's not NW anymore. It will be the District 4 Coalition page, where a lot of what you expect from your website will be there. There'll be a news feed for your neighborhood, a calendar for your neighborhood, all of your committees, board, your agenda minutes, your some pictures. There'll be content there that you can use. But what we're not going to be able to provide is your own, if you want to have your own, otca.org or whatever it may be website, you're going to have to do that because we don't have, it exceeds our scope of work from what the city expects from us.
And that being said, I haven't given up on any of this. I truly believe that, we have to find money from outside sources. And I truly believe that we can do that. We need everybody's head in that though. If we need to find more money, it can't be just me because my connections are only this big, but our connections collectively are so much bigger. So when I say that we are short on funds, I'm asking, take a look at those that are around you that might be able to contribute funding for doing your website, Kathy, or doing all the coalition's websites. Yeah.
So
Also,
wait a minute, Carl, go ahead, Kathy.
yeah, so I have no idea what WordPress costs or the resources that it takes to do Arlington Heights. So I could go and maybe I'm happy to raise money to try to do that. But we need to understand what the cost of those services are.
Okay.
Similarly, we
Kathy,
don't.
I'm more than happy to,
Easy to provide that information.
yeah.
I just may not be the only person that doesn't know. And with Paul, I mean, I'm willing to certainly work on doing more ourselves and all that, but we don't have any idea what Paul's services cost us as Arlington Heights. And so it's hard for us to know what to raise money for if we don't know how much it costs. And
I'm going to say on average, Paul, you can correct me on this, but I'm going to say on average, each neighborhood ran between 350 on the low end and 500 plus on the high end. Paul, would you agree with that?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
Yep.
Folks, we have, we're at the hour.
Now
at
we're
the-
over. I'm
Ooh.
sorry. I mean, I'm happy that you're all here and you're asking these questions, and I'm happy to answer any of them at any time for any of your board members, your officers. Just call us, and the District 4 meetings are the first Thursday of the month. We do like to have every neighborhood represented there. And if there are folks from neighborhoods that are not necessarily the representative, at least you'll get an understanding of everything that's happening in District 4 at that meeting. I guess we could put out a budget by neighborhood. If you guys can send me some information soon, then I can send you some information about how we're budget. I mean, we don't have our final budget together yet. I just sent out the scope of work today. We know we're getting $417,000. We know that, let me confirm that. I'm sorry, $431,000, and $43,000 of that is for our small grants. So 431 minus 43 is basically what our base grant budget is for next year. As opposed to our budget in the previous year, our base grant was like 317,000. So you can see we're right at a little bit. I mean, we're $300,000 plus, but we're not at 400 even. Once we take out $43,000 for small grants, that's our operating budget. What's left? So $43,000 for small grants is like a terrible shot in the punch to the gut too. We gave out $35,000 last year within our 11 neighborhood boundaries. Now we have all these other neighborhoods and we have an additional 10 grand to pass out in small grants. And that's that.
thank you.
All right, are we,
What is that? I vote for Carl for the best room rater. What is that?
well.
Very
it's
cool
this-
windows.
Windows.
Oh.
But the problem is I'm across the street from the NWNW office, so I got to deal with all things Old Town. So that's the trade-off. It's never
It's
a
a
dull moment
fantastic space,
outside my
though.
window.
Yeah,
Never a dull moment.
that's right. Never a dull moment. Thank you, Paul, for everything. Appreciate your being here. I'm open all the time if you have questions about District 4, if you want to set up a meeting with me, if you want your board to come in and meet with us. We're here. We're not trying to hide anything, and we're not trying to sweep anything under the rug. And maybe you would wish that I would sweep some things under the rug, but I don't. So it's just the facts. Thank you all. I'm looking forward to all of us working together more closely. Thank you.
This is
And
very
thank you, Paul.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank
Super
you.
helpful, thanks.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you,
night, everybody.
Julian, for being here. Appreciate
Bye,
all
thank
of you.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.